Hello, I'm Ciaran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring us insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. Quad bikes are an extremely useful machine on any farm. And in this episode, I'm joined by Francis Quigley, machinery specialist with Teagasc, who's going to chat about basic maintenance, some general advice on safe use and how to keep quads in good working order. Francis takes us through basic oil and filter servicing, the importance of checking brakes and general mechanical maintenance. We discuss matching quad bikes up with suitable towing equipment and he highlights some important considerations in this regard. We finish up with Francis discussing the importance of checking controls on a regular basis and addressing any issues that he identify. We start off, however, with Francis discussing the importance of correct tyre pressure, why it should be monitored and adjusted to suit the needs of a specific task, and why it's important to periodically assess tyre wear.
One of the key things that we want to have a look at, on a daily basis is obviously the tyres. It's the one point of contact you have with the ground. So making sure that you've good tread, so for that'll obviously give you good grip, not only to get places, but obviously on the corners and things like that. But also the actual tyre pressure is very important. So just making sure that you have the correct tyre pressure for your bike, that will vary from bike to bike and depending on the tyre. But if you just check your operator's manual, it'll give you the recommended tyre pressure. So again, just to check that all four tyres, are evenly inflated. Again, is very important. So that's I suppose that's a good one just to.
It's a basic check, Francis. You mentioned there tyre wear. I suppose it depends too on the environment they're working in, whether it's mainly on tracks going out for cows or sheep, or it's going off up a hill. Having good tyre grip on it, especially for more off-roading, is obviously very important. But having that even pressure across all tyres, from a health and safety point of view, it's a very basic check to make sure you have right, obviously.
It is and even adjusting tyre pressures, is an important thing that people, would consider, because if you're working, on, we'll say off-road, at slower speeds, a lower tyre pressure is going to give you a much bigger contact area with the ground. So you'll actually get more grip, and it'll obviously, travel better over softer ground. But, if you're doing a lot, higher speeds on roadways and things like that, and corner and at speed, you need a much higher tyre pressure. So again, it's very important that the tyre pressure that you're using is suitable for the conditions that you're working in. But don't be afraid to adjust them to suit your needs.
Yeah, and follow guidance. Tyres is one thing. Obviously, we're talking about taking bends and that. The other thing that's very important is brakes, and it's probably something that's worth checking before you actually realise you need them. How important, on a daily basis, just to check the brakes are working and not seized up or pulling evenly?
Yeah, look, again, a critical check that we'd want to be doing on a daily basis. So I suppose the simple thing is just if you leave the bike, roll at a slow enough speed, and then just pull the brakes and just make sure that it's actually braking evenly. So it's not pulling you to left or right. That's a sign that the brakes are out of balance. So you're really only maybe braking on one side only. So again, just make sure that that's that balance. Again, it'll depend on the actual, the brakes that are on the machine. If you were looking for, a new machine, it's important to be looking for maybe a machine with disc brakes. They'll obviously perform, an awful lot better in the tougher conditions that you're going to be dealing with, around the farm. Rather than, drum or other types of brakes, so they'll have much longer lifespan. But again, even, you will have wear on those in time. So there is, service intervals for those, which we can maybe touch on service intervals later on.
It's certainly something to keep an eye on. In terms of some of the other basic management, I suppose how you look after a machine in some extent is the life of the machine. Intervals for oil changes, stuff like that. We frequently get a ping on a car when it's due, but on a quad bike, often it's kind of left to our own devices. What kind of intervals, Francis, should we be looking at for doing some of that basic mechanical maintenance, like oil changes and some of the basic top-ups on it?
Yeah, well, I suppose, look, on the daily basis, we were talking about the brakes and the tyres and things like that, just the actual controls, just go through those as well, just to make sure that they are all, function properly, that the throttle isn't sticking or anything like that. That'd be obviously very dangerous. And that the steering is smooth all the way, in its full cycle left to right. So, they're kind of, would say, everyday items. You want to be checking eye level. Again, look at, it might be a dipstick, or there might actually be an actual eye level indicator on the front of the crankcase, which is kind of, maybe just a small little glass sight gauge that you'll see. So just, check that on a daily basis. The tires and stuff we've already mentioned. Coolant levels, again, would want to be checked. Looking for leaks, as we'd recommend with any machine, if you could park it, on a dry, solid surface, before you get on the bike then every morning, you just have a look under it and to see if there's any liquids, on the ground. So if there is, then at least if it's on a concrete surface or something like that, you can see if it's maybe oil or if it's water, or maybe brake fluid would obviously be a lot more serious, but if you have that parked, outside where it's going to be wet, or even if it's on a clay surface, it's going to be harder. You might see a spot on the ground, but it'll be harder to identify what that spot is, On the obviously lights and brakes and things as well, the emergency stop would be the daily checks.
You mentioned earlier with service intervals and that on brakes. How difficult is it to replace brake pads on some of the newer models or get that addressed? Or it likely is not the most costly thing to do, but certainly if they're not right, it'll be more expensive if it goes wrong on you.
Look, I mean, there's a 20-hour service, recommended. Now, again, look, it'll vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, but, as a guide, there's kind of a 20-hour service, which is 20 hours or 150 kilometers. That's, basic. That's, you're talking about engine oil change, an engine oil filter. You're talking about just kind of inspecting and cleaning the actual brake system, and then just the actual drivetrain itself. So just inspecting and cleaning those. That might be something that somebody that's reasonably confident could do relatively easily. It's pretty similar to a tractor oil change. You're going to warm up the engine beforehand just to get that oil loose, and to actually it takes all the sediment. The oil actually holds the dirt and sediment as well, so it just shifts that off the bottom of the pan as well. So it's held in the oil, and you'd open then and drain that out. For the 100-hour service and things like that, which would be a higher service, you might be as well going to your actual dealer to do that service. So he'll go through, he would say, the standard service, but he'll also obviously go through the air cleaner and things like that will need to be changed. You might have to replace coolant level. Again, he'd give a thorough, look over. We'll say things like the drive shaft and the drive shaft boots. He'd go through the final gear, the back end oil and differential oil if it's on it. And again, he'll take it through a full check. So again, I would recommend, that you are going back to the dealer for that main 100-hour service. But the 20-hour service, look, is probably somebody that's reasonably confident could do themselves.
Like in all them cases, you're really extending the lifetime of that machine for you. They're an extremely versatile tool on a farm. Of course, the one has to be handled with safety, but oftentimes it's not just the quad for travelling around. They're hitched up to implements, they're towing. How important is it, Francis, that they're correctly matched to any implements they're towing, whether it be spreaders or small trailers for moving stock or other items about?
Yeah, so again, look, it's very important that the implement, it is a very versatile machine, as you say, but it's very important that the implement that you're getting for the machine matches, the size of bike that you have, so again, that the if that's a fertilizer spreader or trailer or whatever, that it matches. Again, even when you're looking at those, it's worth looking at, implements that might have an overrun brake, so in other words, when the weight is pushing on the actual back of the hitch, it's actually braking itself. I suppose another thing that's would be important is something like the swivel hitch on the drawbar, so that if for whatever reason, maybe a fertilizer spreader or something, that if it did happen to turn over, it's not going to force the bike over, because it'll be able to swivel completely independently. a low center of gravity for any of those is very important. Like, you know, so it is important that the implement is designed for the quad bike. You know, so you're not taking, you know, some other implement around the yard, or you haven't modified something. So they'll, you know, they'll have a low center of gravity, and it will have a wide axle. You know, the other thing that it'll tend to have, like, or normally would be expected to have, would be a long drawbar. And again, the advantage of the long drawbar, it's no different than a long crowbar. You know, it's giving you more leverage. So there's you can move that weight of the implement, you know, further forward from the actual wheels that are carrying it, but you're not transferring as much of the weight actually, you know, or downforce down onto the actual back of the quad bike. You know, so you can balance the load that way.
Like, they are powerful. Again, unlike tractors or jeeps or other implements, you haven't got quite the weight to handle it. So I think you might even overrun brakes, similar to what's in livestock trailers, are important to consider with it. You don't have that same level of control that you might have with other implements.
You don't, and like even the operator himself needs to be suited to the machine. You know, like, you know, you do need to be reasonably agile and able to move around, especially, you know, you're working on hilly ground. You know, it does rely on you moving your weight, you know, forwards or backwards or side to side. You know, so you yourself need to be reasonably fit and agile. And you know, back to what we were talking about at the start, you know, that cleanliness. You know, would say muck and dirt and stuff building up on the steps is, you know, is a no-no. Like, you know, you need to have a good firm standing position. You know, if you're working, you know, if you're doing that, we say active driving position, as we call it. You know, where you're kind of semi-standing. You know, so it is very important for those basic checks that we were talking about.
You just mentioned it there, like, the environment is working. It's often not the nicest or easiest environment on the machine, but keeping some of the basics like electrics and that right on a piece of equipment, like, considering the fact it's working in mucky environments, it's working on some of the rough ground, and particularly it's working in very wet conditions. So I'm even thinking from the point of view of cleaning it down afterwards, Francis, how difficult is it to keep the electrics right, or is there any best practice you'd recommend for keeping them working right?
Well, look, you know, I know. Look, it's you know, the best thing really is to do when that dirt and muck is fresh on it. It's going to be very easy to remove it. So if you take, you know, you'll even get away, you know, with a low pressure hose, rinsing it down quickly. I know. Look, it'll vary completely from, you know, farm to farm. Like if you're on a dairy farm and you're running in and out of cow pats every day of the week, like, it's obviously going to have a lot more build up on it, you know, than maybe if you're working on you know, hilly ground with sheep or whatever. But again, you know, washing it down when it's fresh is going to make it very easy. I don't recommend taking a high pressure you know, hose to it. Certainly not, you know, going very hard on it, because, you know, you'll end up driving water in past seals, you know, and things like that, which will end up causing problems further down the line, like with service and that, you know, and boots and things like that you'll end up damaging, you know, on the actual bike. But just, you know, soft hose and give it a wash down.
Keep it right, even from a safety point of view. Francis, look, we just spoke about the electrics there. Like, just maybe as a final question to you, there's a host of other controls, particularly more modern bikes, from diff locks to different things on it. You know, checking that they're working correctly and our fuses are correct in them and different solenoids or switches correctly in them. How troublesome can they be, or how difficult is it to maintain that end of it?
Look, again, I suppose the key thing is just that you're checking them, you know. So again, that, you know, that morning routine is important. That, so you're going through the controls and you're checking with, say, you know, the likes of the, you know, the throttle and the stick and even the steering, you know, basic things like that. That your full movement, so the steering is moving fully left to right. They're, you know, the real critical things. Checking lights, obviously, you know, if you're going on the road, and that indicators and everything obviously need to be, you know, 100%, you know, so you're checking, you know, the likes of those things on a daily basis before you go out on the road.
Francis, thank you very much for your time. We'll catch up with you again maybe for a later episode on more applications for it.
No problem at all.
Okay, we'll have to finish up at this point. Again, I'd like to thank Francis for taking the time to join us, sharing his insights, some very useful and interesting information. I think he highlighted a couple of key areas, you know, the need for regular checking of the basic controls on it, checking tyre pressures, tyre wear. They're basic health and safety checks that are vital to be done on a regular basis. You know, in terms of the mechanical servicing, that's the life of the machine. Whether you're competent enough maybe to do that yourself, or it's need to go back to the garage or place you purchased it from, it will extend the life of the machine and ensure it runs better for you. Just to put a little bit of context around some of the messages Francis was highlighting, I did include a link in the description to a short video clip put together for Virtual Sheep Week highlighting some of these key issues from one of our better farmers. That's it for me. Again, for any updates on the sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Ciaran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and listen in to all our episodes.